I don't remember exactly when I saw my first Honda lawnmower, but from what I recall, I was very impressed with it. The build quality was much better when compared to other residential brands. The only problem was that the price reflected that aspect as well. These are typically not very cheap, but once you get your hands on a good working example, you'll understand why. However, they are far away from perfect and do suffer from a couple of major problems, but is it the mower's fault? In today's video, we're going to be talking about something a bit close to home for me, but I know that I'm not alone. And the best way to talk about it is to use the Honda mowers I've worked on as examples. So what exactly are the most common problems with these mowers then? Well, the first one has to do with their recoils, which has a tendency not to work. The second one would be starting problems related to the automatic choke system, and the last and most annoying one would be the self-propelled system not working. And on a related issue, the wheels not spinning backwards, making them tough to pull backwards as well. I think the best way to talk about this topic would be to start with the recoil and work our way down. So I do have to let you know that I've never owned a Honda lawnmower new from out of the box. All the ones I've ever owned personally were castaways from people getting rid of them or were selling them for parts. It's very important to know that because they could have been neglected before I ever owned them. So what's wrong with the recoil system then? Well, after some time, the recoil will start to have issues. It might start with the pull rope not retracting all the rope without some help, but eventually it'll just stay out until some time has passed by. What that means is that the return spring is not broken, but something is keeping it from working like it should. The simple answer is that dirt and grime are building up on the spring and causing it to bind up. This problem is very easy to fix, just so long as there isn't anything else wrong with the spring. All we have to do is find a way to clean the dirt off the spring, and there are multiple ways to do this. And the easiest way to do this is to remove the recoil and spray the area where the spring is located at with some kind of solvent. I like to use brake cleaner, or if you don't have that, carb cleaner works as well too. But those two solvents are not the only ones. You can use some other ones, you just have to be a bit creative. But what if you don't want to choose to be creative and just want to get the spring cleaned? In that case, you'll have to carefully take apart the recoil, remove the spring, and then clean all the dirt from every part you come across. So why does this problem even happen, and why does it take some time for it to become an issue? So the answer isn't with the way it's designed. Instead, I find it to be related to how the mower is used. The recoil is the main area where air is meant to go into the engine to keep it cool. And if you mow in areas that are bare with no grass, you'll kick up the dirt in that spot. That dirt can then pass by the recoil and collect on the spring and the area around it. So if you use the mower in bare spots even briefly, it could increase your chances of this problem happening. But if you don't have any bare spots or you simply avoid them, then this shouldn't be a problem. However, this problem is so common that there's a huge market in new recoils. And because this engine is very popular and the recoils are replaced so often, it makes them extremely affordable. In fact, if you try to repair the recoil and it doesn't get that much better, I would just replace it to save time and avoid the headache, especially if you're not able to get it to work the way you want it to. But what happens if you not only find dirt on the spring, but also rust? Well, in that case, a new recoil might be the better option. You can, of course, just replace the spring, but if you've never done it before, well, you're in for a real treat. We then come to the second major problem, which is of course the starting problem related to the automatic choke system. Not all Honda engines have this system, but it's pretty obvious that yours has it because there won't be a visible choke lever on the airbox or the handle. I am not a big fan of the automatic choke system, but not because I've had personal problems with it. But instead, I just like having things simple, and with less complexity, there's a lot less to go wrong. Now the other two systems I've already mentioned earlier, and even though each of those two systems has their issues, in my opinion, both are a lot easier to deal with, but you may not see it that way. The reason why is because the other two systems are controlled by the user, and just so long as there aren't any other problems, they both work really well. The main problem with the automatic system is that it relies on a thermostat that over time could fail, and fixing it could be more trouble than some consumers are willing to go through. In fact, I've heard of consumers swapping out the carbs to the manual style just to avoid the hassles from having to try to repair it again. And the reason why is because the thermostats can fail again, especially if you replaced it with one that's not OEM quality. So if you do find yourself in a situation where you need to replace it, just pay for the OEM part and you'll be better off. And unless you're a great problem solver, switching over to the manual style may not be the best option. Obviously, you'll need to do a lot of diagnostic work to help determine if the starting problem you're having is related to the choke. Remember, there could be other reasons why the engine isn't starting besides a failed choke system. I know this is tough to hear, but sometimes trying to figure out what's wrong with it takes more time than the repair itself. And if you're not prepared to put the time needed to diagnose the problem and fix it, then you might want to consider taking it to someone else to fix. There's no shame in throwing in the towel and having someone else fix it. In fact, it might be the smartest choice to make in some cases. The last and most annoying problem I've come across is the dreaded failure of the self-propel system. And for those of you who are still young, pushing a mower with a non-working self-propel won't be a big deal. However, as you get older, that's something you probably don't want to deal with. The self-propel systems on these Honda lawnmowers have been pretty much the same for the last 20 years, at least from what I can tell. And it's quite an ingenious system, that is, when it works, and that really depends on how it was maintained. I do have to let you know that there are a couple of different styles of transmissions for these mowers, so the problems might be different for each one. But of course, the main problem is that the drive system stops working, and the first step is to try and figure out why that is. Like I mentioned earlier, you're going to need to put a lot of time into diagnosing it first before ever buying new parts. In most cases, but not all of them, there's nothing wrong with the transmission itself, and it mostly has to do with something around it. In fact, the last one I worked on turned out to be a stuck cable that activates the system. But in some other cases, it could be a broken cable or a broken belt or possibly even an issue with the speed selector if it has one. Other times, the belt has simply come off one of the pulleys, but this is quite rare. Of course, these problems may not be the same ones you'll get on other brands, so why is this such a big deal for the Honda? The answer is getting access to the drive system just to repair it. Honda does a great job of protecting the system, but it takes more time to work on it. And while other systems on other brands are less complicated, they're also less protected, which means working on them is a lot easier too. That does bring up a good question about the Honda self-propel system. Are they more prone to failing than other brands? And in my opinion, I don't think so. However, I do base my answer on the amount of time that's on the mower. The reason I say that is because I find that Honda mowers with self-propel systems have quite a lot of time on them. Whereas on the other brands, they might seem to have a lot of issues with them, but they may also have a lot less time when compared to the Hondas. So basically what I'm saying is that these self-propel problems are pretty much expected once you hit a certain age. And it seems like a lot of them live a long life and then start to develop these problems. That just tells me that their transmissions are pretty good, but not everything about their design is without fault, which brings us to the last related problem. This is the odd problem of them not being able to roll backwards, which for most consumers is a really odd thing for them to do. To understand why this happens, you need to know that the drive wheels are set up like ratchets and make a clicking noise when the mower is being pushed forward. This means the transmission is being bypassed and not turning while you're not using the drive system. However, the bypass system doesn't work when you're pulling the mower backwards, and you'll know this because there's no clicking noise from the wheels. So when pulling the mower backwards, the transmission will spin, which is normal, but if the mower hasn't been used for a long time and is left outside, the axles could get stuck to their supports in the adjusting arm. And if this does happen, it'll not only keep the mower from rolling backwards, but it also prevents the self-propel from working as well. The main reason for this is the formation of rust on the axles due to storage conditions. But it could also happen from repeated uses in wet grass, followed by a long period of not being used. I tried to prevent this from happening by spraying a lubricant into the axles at the adjusters, but it's not a guaranteed fix. The best method to prevent this is proper storage combined with regular usage. What that means is that if you decide to use a lawn service to take care of your grass and you insist on keeping the mower as a backup, I would recommend that you start the mower once a month and run the self-propel for 5 to 10 minutes. This, however, is something most consumers will never do, and I can't blame them either. Of course, there's always more than one way to prevent this problem, so I'll leave that up to you. But as for the problems that these Honda mowers seem to have, I'm okay with dealing with them. Because if I wasn't, then I would have gotten rid of my Hondas a long time ago and gotten something better. Now don't worry, all lawn mowers will develop some sort of a problem if not taken care of, so don't think you're going to avoid them. So my question is, have you ever seen one of these major problems on a Honda mower? Or even possibly something like it, but from a different brand? Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or about your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.